Welcome to What's Next for InsurTech, the first in our new webinar series. I'm Moshe Merens, editor of InsurTech at FinTech Futures. Apologies for the slight delay in coming to you this afternoon. We will also be live tweeting this webinar, so you can join in the conversation using the hashtag InsurTechWebinar. So, as we all know, 2016 was a big year for InsurTech, and we have every reason to expect 2017 to be equally exciting. A number of questions come to mind in particular. Which InsurTechs will begin to achieve scale? How will the role of InsurTechs in the industry evolve? Will we see more single-point disruptors, some niche MGAs, or full-stack challenger carriers emerge? Will insurance's Uber moment finally arrive? And how will insurers' business models begin to change in light of the trends we see in value chain disaggregation and the need to differentiate through value-added services? All exciting topics, I'm sure you'll agree. And in this webinar, we'll hear the insurers, investors, and startups' perspective on some of these issues around what 2017 holds for InsurTech. Today, I'm joined on the line with Moshe Tamir, Global Head of Digital Transformation at Generali, Jannat, Shah, Associate at Access Strategic Ventures, and Jean-Charles Velge, co-founder of Qover, to discuss what's next for InsurTech. So welcome all. Before I hand off to one of our guests to discuss their view of the future of InsurTech, I'd like to remind you that we'll be holding an interactive Q&A after the opening presentations. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can send them to us using the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. So let's start off with Moshe Tamir. Moshe, can you tell us what you think is going to unfold in InsurTech over 2017?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Jean. So I think, as Jean was mentioned, 2016 was intensive, and to my opinion, it's just, the end of the beginning. So we are really excited, and the time are really exciting for the whole ecosystem, for the insurer, for the startups, and for the investors. We all aware of the fact that, new technologies are about to transform our 4 trillion business globally. Probably in a couple of areas, and when we research and we speak to global CEOs and global directors in insurance companies, 3 out of 4 of them believe that some part of their business are at risk of disruption. This is a massive market for startups, but also for incumbents to really embrace those new technologies. So just in the past, we used to speak about fintech, and just to give you flavors of the numbers. So if the insurance market is close to 5 billion market, the whole lending market is 1.6. The whole robo-advisory / investment is close to 900 million. The payments is 500 million. So we are talking about a robust market. From the insurance perspective, we probably see 4 main areas that technology can help us embrace or disrupt our business. Definitely new tech-enabled products and business models. Technologies that can help us to reduce risk and number of claims. Innovative distribution channels, and probably lower cost of administrations of claim processes. These are the 4 main areas I believe that insurers will see as greatest opportunities to partner and embrace new technology. When you look historically on the insurance industry, probably which is also relevant for other financial institutions, we were very much focused inside out, building stuff inside, and believe that we have the capability to design and build also new technologies. I think the biggest revolution that we're starting to see in 2016, and we'll see more and more, that some of the big incumbents do understand that and recognize the potential of technology, but also understand our limitations and capacity, and this is where we do believe that there are great opportunities to partner with the ecosystem. So as you probably all aware, most of the companies are active in different ways. Some are building incubations, corporate venture funds, and different structures to, on one hand, invest, while also to embrace those technologies inside the organization. So as a quick introduction to what happened, what are the key areas, and where we see it going forward, I think this could be a good summary to start with.
Thank you, Moshe. Next, we'll hear from Jannat Shah on the investor's perspective. Thanks, Jannat.
Right, thanks, Oshin. I think to build quite nicely from what Moshe said, he identified these 4 areas where insurers like to see disruption, and I think investors are completely aligned on that. And it does really start right back to defining what InsurTech really means. Now, InsurTech at its most obvious looks like another insurance company that is tech-enabled. However, any distribution opportunity, any opportunity to render the insurance ecosystem more efficient, to make pieces of the insurance business communicate better with one another, for example, the policy issuing, claims and renewals, to own the customer journey better, and all the back office concerns that an insurance company has, for example, systems, all these legacy issues that they've inherited. These all encompass what InsurTech can disrupt. So, for example, I've said this quite often, and I think that this year is the year that people will perhaps agree with me, that the best InsurTech may in fact not be recognized as InsurTech, at least not for now. For example, if you think about most of the prop tech that we see in the industry, people have quite often linked prop tech with fintech, but if you think about it, when you think about what prop tech does in the market it serves, for example, it's serving a market where people are making big financial decisions, and coupled with that are often consumer decisions about renewing insurance policies, changing insurance policies, and big life decisions happen at that point. So a lot of other technology that we see as investors in the industry is also very, very relevant to the insurance ecosystem. And I really hope that this is the year when distribution is appreciated much better, because insurers, including AXA, are realizing that insurance can no longer just be price competition. I know that this relates a lot more to general and non-life insurance. We looked at a wave of price comparison, and I believe that this year people will start thinking of other ways we can offer a consumer of insurance value beyond just competing on price. For example, with your motor insurance policy, what else can you get out of it, rather than it being a grudge purchase that you have to do to comply with regulation and law. So there's going to be a big behavioral change. There's going to be a big acceptance change with what InsurTech really means. And insurers and startups will work together increasingly, and investors are very much excited about the ecosystem.
Great. Thank you for that, Jannat. Very interesting to hear your thoughts. And finally, we'll move to Jean-Charles, who's co-founder of Qover, to give us his insights into what he thinks will emerge in InsurTech over 2017. Thanks, Jean-Charles.
Hi, Oshin. Thank you. We at Qover, we believe that the future of insurance, that's a bit more further away than 2017. We believe that insurance will be invisible and parametric. Those are two very important concepts of what insurance will be later. So it's basically insurance will be integrated in any product or service that you buy. Now, if you think about insurance as being invisible and parametric, what we believe is that the whole front part of insurance will be disrupted by InsurTechs, FinTechs, PropTechs. What happens basically on the front side is that insurers will need a lot more capabilities that they haven't built up over the years, and we think the InsurTechs will do that. What you will see emerging is the emergence of giant risk carriers over Europe, over the US. Today, those risk carriers are locked country by country, but you will see the insurer will basically go back to their core of what they do best, is carrying the risk, and the InsurTechs will take the front. That's the long-term view. Now, at Qover, how do we tackle, once you have that vision, how do we tackle that problem? We have APIs insurance. So what does it mean? Is that we are basically as the Stripe, but for insurance. Stripe really innovated by having the payment gateway and the merchant account. We have the same at Qover, is that on one side, we have completely recoded the front and back end of an insurer in-house, and on the other side, we go the MGA route, which means that we are cover holders of the Lloyd's of London. And the disruption that we try to bring to the market is mainly on the distribution side. If the API is insurance, basically you can start selling insurance to anybody that has a digital ecosystem. So that is what we're trying to build at Qover and what we think the future will be.
Thank you, Jean-Charles. I can see that we have over 300 of you listening. We're very excited to have so many from the InsurTech community with us for this webinar. So if you haven't already done so, I encourage you to submit your questions via the Ask a Question box at the bottom of the screen. We have had quite a few questions come in already. The first that I'd like to ask goes back to the idea of open AIs and open platforms. We have a question here that asks, will InsurTech follow in FinTech's wake, and will there be a bigger emphasis put on opening up access to third parties on the part of insurers? Perhaps, Moshe, you can give us an insight into that.
So I think that's a very interesting question on one hand, but on the other hand, it's a very generic one, because in some areas we already doing some of those activities. I mean, remember that insurance have on one hand the caring piece, but on the other hand the service and assistance piece. So we are working a lot with third parties, maybe not fully open API, but we are really open for that perspective. On the core system and core legacy, I think that's interesting challenge from technology perspective, and it will be more challenging to answer it as generic as it is. So it's in general, we are open, and we would like to be open to partner and embrace technology where possible, but also keep in mind the legacy systems of hundreds of here which are built here. So we probably need it's more concrete discussion based on opportunities.
Jannat, I suppose turning to you on the same question, are you seeing any kind of similarities develop in InsurTech as you have done across the broader FinTech piece around moving towards a more open kind of insurance market where access to third parties is granted by insurers? Do you see that as a trend that's going to come out strongly across 2017?
Well, I personally haven't seen this happen so far, and I can see why people would look for the analogy between what I would call the banking 2.0 of FinTech and what InsurTech could be. I think fundamentally what banks are very different. Revolutionizing a deposit-taking institution is a very different step from revolutionizing somebody that prices risk with a huge balance sheet. So I'm not sure how exactly we'll see this in the market. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I'm saying that I think this will be a slower burn, and it's hard to see how it won't happen, because there'll be a lot of people who are innovating in such a sense that they will need capacity providers to provide them with instant quotes to be able to communicate back and forth with that pace. So it is necessary to evolve the ecosystem. I just find it hard, given the complexity of the differences between what I call banking 2.0 and the InsurTech movement, to see how this will translate. But it's a very interesting topic to address, and I would love to see some solutions in that space.
Jean-Charles, as an InsurTech startup that obviously engages with a lot of incumbent institutions, what are your thoughts on this topic? I mean, have you had any traction on that front, or do you have any insights you can share?
Yes, for sure. I think this will be crucial, and you see a lot of players on the market that are innovating. Also, from the traditional insurance, but also reinsurance companies. I think the incumbent players are really realizing the wave of innovation that will happen in their sector, and there's actually a lot of movement. And contrary to what happened in fintech, where banks were slower, I think some players in the more traditional, but certainly on the reinsurance part, will be able to move very quickly and will embrace InsurTech companies to actually join them and be able to very quickly respond to market demands.
Thank you, Jean-Charles. Very interesting. Another question we have here, several people actually touching on the same topic, that would like to know, what are the main barriers that you have encountered or noticed that prevent the InsurTech agenda moving forward? Moshe, perhaps you can give us some insights from Generali.
So, my view, I mean, if you look at the interesting thing, if you look at the most of the InsurTech that are happening at the moment, so I think that probably 80 to 90% of the companies I've seen or I've had the chance to be exposed to are enablers rather than disruptors. And the value chain in insurance is a long one, and it's a complex one, and there are a lot of places where tech can enable us. So I do believe, although we all talks about disruption, that again, a lot of opportunities exist in enabling. So we do see some insurance companies that are partnering with InsurTech, and I fully agree with Jannat comment from before. I mean, InsurTech is a so broad area that covers so many areas of technologies, and we do see opportunities when companies are partnering. In Generali, for example, when we identified an opportunity to partner or to deal with an InsurTech company, for example, MyDrive, which is a telematics provider of data analytics that helps us to improve our pricing and identify behavioral driving. We finalized an agreement and we bought the company and we are partnering with them. So we do believe that in area that there are opportunities to embrace those new technologies to work. The biggest challenge, I think, sits very much on an industry which was for many, many years world inside out rather than outside in. So it takes some time in terms of the transformation, in terms of the ability to convince and encourage both the technology but also the business people that there are areas that we have capacity and we have strong capabilities, but we also have to be aware of areas that they are not our strongest capabilities, and definitely digital is not one of them as an insurance company. So that's more the cultural change piece that we have to work both on the technology but also on the mindset of the top executive here. But I'm very optimistic because it seems like we don't have any more to convince on that. We just need to start and make it happen, and the first signs are already there.
Thanks, Moshe. I suppose it'd be interesting to hear the thoughts of Jean-Charles on this from the startup's perspective. If partnership is so key to driving the InsurTech agenda, what are the barriers or challenges that you have encountered?
A lot of barriers, actually. So that's one of, I think, the most difficult things to do in InsurTech is that you have an incredibly regulated environment that you have to navigate, and InsurTech is very broad, as said before. So it has, you can be either a tech company and support and innovate on certain parts of the value chain. We here at Qover, we are going the managing agent route, and if you go that way, we believe there is a lot of value to that, but it's extremely complicated. So you have to get licenses. We are cover holders of the Lloyd's of London. You have to hire the right people like every business, but then you have to make technology, your whole back end and front end working. And you are overlooked by a very wary regulator, and you have to navigate that also with the regulator. So The number of barriers we have encountered since the beginning are gigantic, but we see it as an opportunity because every time we manage to jump over that barrier, we leave the competition behind.
Thank you, Jean-Charles. I suppose another question coming in that would probably be interesting to hear Jannat's thoughts on are where are the greatest opportunities for investment in 2017? Where's the smart money going?
If only I knew, eh? Well, I think there's been a lot of lessons learned in the industry. For example, I feel that people are now coming off a blockchain hysteria. That's more of a personal view than a fund view. And they're looking to other things. And from my perspective, the way I think about opportunities that are relevant to InsurTech and indeed Access Strategic Ventures at large, we look at everything fintech, everything enterprise, everything health tech, and consumer marketplaces. And I think that this piece of consumer marketplace is a very interesting space in particular because the amount that you can learn about consumer behavior and then have insurance as an add-on product. As it's been mentioned before, insurance can become invisible and parametric. And how can it do this? It can do this by giving the consumer a different level of convenience. Call it the Uber model, call it the Airbnb model, but there'll be something else in the front and insurance will come in the back. So I'm very excited to see, particularly on a consumer marketplace level, how we engage with the consumer, how we collect the correct data to then go on and price the right insurance for them. So I'm very, very excited to see consumer marketplaces this year.
Thanks, Jannat. And I suppose touching on what you said there and another inevitable question, we have here, will blockchain deliver in 2017? What and how? Moshe, your thoughts?
You give me the most difficult one, huh? So I think it's very much connected also to the point mentioned before. The blockchain is probably the biggest opportunity, but there is a lot of ambiguity around what's in there and what is the role and what is it about exactly the role of the insurer, the reinsurer in that ecosystem. So definitely we're looking at an industry which is not the most efficient one in terms of transactions, in terms of complexity. So in theoretical exercise, blockchain could really simplify a lot, but it requires a much more coherent ecosystem that to help and make this orchestra play well, which traditionally is not the case in insurance, both between companies, but even between countries, regulation, and local institutions. Even if you look at the big global players like AXA, Allianz, Generali, and the big, European players, although they are bigger players, they have built most of their companies by acquisition throughout the years. So they really, even within themselves, they have one big company, but inside they are built in a structural way, which will make it a challenge. So I think it's an opportunity. My personal view, 2017 will be a little bit too early to see first results on that.
Thanks, Moshe. Perhaps another one for Jannat here. How can insurers build a spirit of innovation within their businesses, keeping in mind that many of the executives have spent long careers in the company? Is there a kind of blueprint for setting up an approach to InsurTech?
It's interesting, and I think that touches on a company's culture, and I think it starts with that willingness to change. And as far as I've seen, all insurers have held their hands up and said, we do need to embrace technology and we do need to change. Granted, the C-suites and the execs might not be the people to bring about that change. I mean, ultimately, they are insurance. So take, for example, the likes of AXA. We have obviously, AXA is our sole LP in our venture fund, so they're clearly very committed to exploring technology through financing it. And then they also have an incubator by the likes of Comet. So a lot of insurers will go about this by setting up external arms. They need to have a sense of detachment from the exploratory diligence that goes on about the startup ecosystem, the understanding of technology will have to be an outside-in process, but there needs to be inside-out interest. So I think that insurers definitely have the capacity to explore. However, they need to set up a proper infrastructure in which to do it. And I think that, AXA is a leading example of how it's been done. And there are plenty of insurers who are doing the same.
Thanks, Jannat. Here's an interesting one, and perhaps one for Jean-Charles, as he mentioned that the future of insurance is bound to be invisible. We have a comment here, which is we hear a lot of talk about engagement insurance and about how insurers will have to engage their customers on a daily basis. I work in an insurance company, and I don't want to hear from my insurance company every day. What do you think the future of engagement looks like then, Jean-Charles? Do you think there's this role for this everyday insurer that you're in almost constant contact with in some way or other? Or what do you think of the idea of engagement insurance?
All right, very good question. I think it's going to be both ways, but most of the people don't want any problems with insurers or don't want to be in contact with their insurance company. So I have more difficult really seeing the business model in pure on-demand insurance. I think on some products it makes sense, but it's not going to be on the whole market because that asks for the customers to actually have an insurance app next to the banking app they already have and engage with their insurance like that. So that's not what we believe at Qover will be the future of insurance. I think it's the opposite in a certain way. It's the fact that if you API insurance and you actually make it super easy for people to integrate it in their product offering, there you really add value. But of course, once the customer has a claim or a question, you need superb customer service, and that will change the user experience. But I do not believe myself, except for some very specific part of the business, that people want to engage with insurers.
So you find yourself in agreement with the question there. That's very interesting. So I suppose we're going to be wrapping up shortly, so I just have time for one more question, and perhaps this is quite an apt one to conclude on. It says, in one sentence and one only, give me one prediction for the year. So perhaps, what's the most exciting trend you think will kind of come to fruition over the year, or is there any kind of standout thing that you think will happen in 2017? Perhaps, Moshe, I'll go to you first.
In one sentence. So I think in 2017 the big winners will be the technologies or the InsurTech that will help the traditional insurers to connect the old and the new. So if they enable us through technology to put a digital layer on our physical and existing asset, that will have a massive impact on our business in 2017.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Moshe. And Jannat, your prediction?
It's a really tough one. But I predict that the InsurTechs that will win this year will be ones that turn insurance from a grudge purchase into a convenience purchase. And what I mean by that, I guess, is we buy insurance because we're loss averse. We buy it because we have to, and we buy it to protect an underlying asset. But we don't do it with a sense of verve. We don't do it with the joy of, say, buying a new car, perhaps. And if the insurance proposition stops being just price competition and there's an element of convenience in it for the consumer, there's an added feature to it. Perhaps when you buy your car insurance, you also get valuable data on the engine of your car, it's the connectivity of it. When we evolve to that level where our insurance is in the back end and in the front end there's some convenience factor, I think there's going to be some severe disruption.
Thanks, Jannat. And finally, Jean-Charles, your prediction for 2017, one prediction.
We believe that in 2017, the amount of InsurTech companies that are going to be created is going to be massive. Basically, nobody was looking at InsurTech 1.5 years ago, nearly. When we started, the word didn't even really exist on the internet. Now that people have seen the opportunity, you will see a massive number of InsurTech, but tech or prop tech companies looking at how they can innovate. So the innovation will be way faster than most people think.
Thank you, Jean-Charles. Thanks for that. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. I'd like to thank all 300 of you for turning up for this webinar. Thanks for joining us, Moshe, Jannat, and Jean-Charles. We look forward to seeing you at InsurTech Rising on the 16th to 18th of October at the Business Design Centre in London, where we'll see plenty of innovation in action. We'll have over 100 InsurTech demos at Europe's largest gathering of digital leaders, C-level executives, and InsurTech entrepreneurs. If you have any feedback on today's webinar or any recommendations for future webinars, please do complete our short survey at the end of this webinar. It should flash up on your screen shortly. Thanks and goodbye.